By the way, if anyone here is in advertising or marketing, kill yourself.
Can you imagine that joke in our time? No, but Bill Hicks could. Bill Hicks was a special person, a comedian who transcended the boundaries of his shows, delved into dark and unscrupulous humor, yet filled with symbolic meaning in its construction. He achieved what any other comedian would only dream of, becoming the prophet of comedy, the Jesus of stand-up. This is the story of Bill Hicks, and how he is an icon for many, and a few.
This is Bill Hicks, folks. Billy!
James Melvin Hicks and Mary Reeser Hicks were a married couple living in Valdosta, Georgia. They had 2 children, Lynn and Steve Hicks, until on December 16, 1961, a child was born who would change people's lives and eventually become one of the greatest icons of comedy. William Melvin Hicks, or Bill Hicks for friends, had a relatively simple childhood. His father worked for General Motors, and his mother was a homemaker. During his childhood, he had to endure several moves before settling in Houston, which prevented him from making friends. Finally, when he entered Stratford High School, he befriended a young man with whom he would develop a strong taste for comedy and live performances. Dwight Slade immediately became Bill's best friend, with whom he began to explore this vibrant world, where one of their main inspirations was the director, writer, actor, and comedian Woody Allen. They even wrote some comedy routines together based on him.
When I was 13 years old, I was really influenced by Woody Allen, and I would do material like him just to get into, be able to perform.
In school, Bill performed his entertainment shows, using the distinctive humor of Allen and Richard Pryor, although he leaned more towards Allen's jokes. Meanwhile, at home, he didn't put aside his passion and devoted himself to writing somewhat more biting but well thought out comedic lines, which he'd slipped under his brother Steve's room door, who was completely amazed by what his brother presented, expressing that he was a genius. This led him to intensify his comedic interest in mockery, or rather, satire, targeting the CBS, a very conservative evangelical organization to which his family belonged. This was in response to his father's initially controversial statement, "I believe the Bible is the direct word of God," to which his son responded, "You know, some people think they're Napoleon. It's okay. Beliefs are beautiful. Learn them, but don't share them as if they were the truth." These would be the first steps in his career.
Hey, buddy, we're Christians. We don't like what you said. I said, then forgive me.
In 1976, at only 15 years old, Bill and Dwight, who at the time called themselves Hicks and Slade, tried to participate in a local program, the Jerry Lewis Telethon for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, but their parents prevented them. This led them to secretly decide to create their own independent shows, in secret. In fact, Bill would sneak out of the house to go to a new comedy club in the city called Comedy Workshop.
I'd go up to do homework, right? And then I'd go down out the window, down the over the garage, down the gutter, and my friend would be out in the back with a car, and we'd go downtown.
And it was clearly a success, especially for Bill, who quickly became the star of the place, a child prodigy in a world of adults. However, this moment of greatness wouldn't last long, as his parents would eventually put an end to it and move him to Little Rock, Arkansas. Fortunately, he could avoid this move with the condition of completing his early school years, to which they agreed. During this time, he would discover another of his great passions, playing the guitar, which he did in a rock band in his garage, practically hidden from his family's view for a whole year, while participating in the Texas Outlaw Comic, a comedy center in Houston, where he was not alone, but in the company of comedy giants like Sam Kinison and Ron Schock, great comedians of the future. And now, yes, Bill Hicks's journey toward greatness will begin, but not without encountering a few more stumbling blocks. In the 1980s, he decided to move to Los Angeles, Hollywood, the land of big celebrities. Since his inspiration came from there, he wanted to try his luck there as well. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on his side at that time. Regrettably, the most notable thing he did was perform at a comedy club that, while promoting other great comedians, didn't give him much visibility. He tried to participate in a TV pilot without success.
What am I gonna wear?
What could he want?
And along with his friend Slade, they attempted to launch a series with a script he had, called The Suburbs, but they didn't pay much attention to the project. During this period, he would begin his recurring addiction to psychotropic drugs, which would play a significant role in his comedy career. At the age of 22, in 1983, he returned to Houston to take on a role at the Comedy Workshop, where he would now begin to gain much more recognition locally and work with none other than Jay Leno. All these events would lead him to join The Tonight Show with David Letterman, who was a very prominent host at the time.
Please give a warm welcome to Bill Hicks.
It's here where all these experiences and his innate comedic talent will begin to bear fruit. After experimenting with meditation, magic shrooms, and a fairly orthodox diet, as well as much stronger drugs and alcohol abuse, he had the ultimate spiritual experience. And yes, he also jokes about his addictions, but that's for later. It wasn't until 1987 that he could take his career to the next level. At 26, he began to reach new heights. And we're not talking in a psychotropic sense. He was literally at the peak of his career, and it was all thanks to an appearance on Rodney Dangerfield's Young Comedians special.
In fact, he's so far ahead of his time, his parents haven't met yet. Here he is, Bill Hicks.
This would be one of the major catalysts for him to move to New York and embark on a more star-studded comedian's life, with a total of 300 shows per year for the next 5 years, which is quite impressive. Thanks to this, he left behind drugs, tobacco, and alcohol, perhaps because he had little time to invest in his own vices. Although, in his own words, he continued to experience the effects of marijuana, LSD, and psychedelic mushrooms. In 1990, he released his first album, Dangerous, and joined the HBO show Travels to Britain, where his performances became more polished, profound, and interesting without losing the comedy.
Little nippy. It's kind of fun, though, in that weather, going outdoors, watching smokers pass out because they don't know when they're done exhaling.
Gradually, he established himself as one of the comedy greats, not to mention his passion for rock and the fact that he had a band, as mentioned earlier regarding the release of his first album. This was an element he often used to add more punch to the show. He reached the pinnacle, but in 1993 he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. By then he had already relapsed into drugs and a strong addiction to nicotine, and finally on February 26, 1994, at only 32 years old, he passed away, but not without leaving behind a great legacy and some truly unique comedic performances that truly demonstrated that comedy could live on.
If it's a choice between eternal hell and good tunes or eternal heaven and new kids on the fucking block, I'm gonna be surfing on the lake of fire, rocking out. High-fiving Satan every time I pass him on the fucking shore.
Very irreverent, sarcastic, and rebellious, but also deep and philosophical. Almost all stand-ups had this narrative weight behind them, with the intention of conveying something deeper. He chose to tackle serious and controversial topics like abortion, pornography, drugs, anarchy, and religion. He didn't seem to be afraid of anything. Not only that, but he tackled concepts like energy and vibrations with force and humor, even calling God love in a comedic tone, without losing that playful but satirical air.
Vibrations in the mind of the one true God, whose name is love.
During his time, he referred to life as an amusement park attraction, a roller coaster that travels. But at some point, someone who knows comes back and says, "Hey, this is just a ride."
I learned a lot about women. I think I learned exactly how the fall of man occurred in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and Adam said one day, "Wow, Eve, here we are at one with nature, at one with God. We'll never age, we'll never die. And all our dreams come true the instant that we have them." And Eve said, "Yeah, it's just not enough, is it?"
At the same time, he expressed his grievances about religion and how dogmatic it can become, a philosophy that many people would embrace more strongly in the years to come. He spoke at length about how people who fervently believed in it seemed deeply involved. The way he addressed these topics was simply admirable, as he expressed them using a myriad of comedy techniques, from impressive facial reactions to intense expressivity, creating different distinct voices and characters.
Because I know if Jesus were here, he'd probably have an Uzi on him. Don't you think he would, Jesus? Yeah, he would. The Prince of Peace is back, but he's pissed off.
It's quite admirable when you manage to find the balance between existential messages, political opinions, personal ideals, and principles, while maintaining a comic and entertaining atmosphere. Bill showed that his stand-up was art, because art is about expressing, whether it's an idea, principles, or ideals, in a way that can reach people. That's something only art itself can do, which is why he's called an artist. But Bill's consciousness transcended these primary concepts and went much further. Many times he even foresaw issues years in advance. Although he mocked everything, he always did it from a deep perspective. He seemed almost like a comedy prophet, trying to pull people out of what he considered good and acceptable, making you question the principles established for years. He managed to uproot the social hypocrisy of political correctness of his time. But if there's something truly crazy about Hicks, it's that, like a good philosopher, he tried to explain our existence, and now it's time to talk about that. Even though he was a prodigy and had a great mind, that doesn't mean he was a god or a prophet. Hicks is far from what has been postulated from the beginning of the video, and I'll explain why this is better than him being some kind of messiah. Bill Hicks was not perfect. He was a flesh and blood man who suffered, cried, and even doubted his own words on more than one occasion. And although he didn't say it, this is more than a fact because he was a human being. One of the biggest issues were his addictions, which, though they fueled his creativity, the use of alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs as fuel is something that quickly consumes its bearer. This stems from his personal problems. On more than one occasion, he mentioned, even in one of his comedy monologues, that he didn't like his father, and even if it's just a comedic aside, it shows he had problems in his childhood and adolescence. Hicks is an example of a man who did as he pleased and lived life to the fullest, and in the end he might not have regretted it as he probably did, but he always did what he wanted. But it's this challenging life that shows us what the limits are, and although he may say there should be no limits, his word is not law, as he himself said in response to his father's belief that the Bible is the word of God. He makes it clear that he doesn't possess the truth, and that what he says cannot be taken as law. In fact, even if he had wanted to, he could have founded a religion in his name, but he never did. He always remained true to what he liked, which was making jokes and expressing his thoughts and fears. He was a forward-thinking man for his time, one of the few minds that have been born, but he was also a troubled man. Nevertheless, with all these flaws, he is someone who is now admired and respected by all, earning the title he deserves as one of the most influential comedians in the niche. Bill was earning admiration within the industry. Even actors like Joseph Gordon admire him, and have mentioned that, from a young age, they always had great respect for Bill Hicks as a comedian and genius.
He's like the Biggie Smalls of comedy. Because the amount of work he did, it's gold, and he died so fucking young.
Richard Jeni, an actor and comedian who has been inspired by Bill throughout his career, is one of those who have received his influence and expressed their great admiration. Russell Crowe, a well-known Hollywood actor who has starred in box office hits, has stated that he follows much of the work that Hicks did and admires him for it. This demonstrates that his legacy has not been lost, and his words have only increased in historical value over the years. Bill Hicks was a great comedian, but also a great genius who had a vision far ahead of his time. He showed great courage in his career and as a person, and although he had some troubles along the way, that doesn't mean he didn't make history. Unfortunately, he had a premature death, and truly deserved to live longer. Although his time in life was short, he managed to touch hundreds of lives.